For those of you that are checking this out on YouTube, or the couple of you guys that are on here with us, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time out to listen to our panelists here and listen to the conversation that we have. There's a lot of great things like this out there right now, and hopefully that you take something out of this. That's my hope for you guys. I'd like to start by introducing our staff. My name is Matt Marsh. I'm an assistant baseball coach. I'm going to introduce Scott Heath next. I've worked with Scott Heath here at Maine. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the recruitment coordinator, pitching coach at University of Maine.
Ro?
Hey, everybody, it's Chris Rojas, pitching coach over at New York Tech.
Steve?
Steve Adkins. I'm the pitching coach at Fairleigh Dickinson University.
And Rob?
What's going on, guys? My name is Rob Hardy. I'm the pitching coach at Siena College.
Awesome. I'm really jacked up about this one because we got a lot of great people on this, a lot of great friends on this. I've learned from each and every one of you guys, either directly through conversation, through working together, through conversation and passing, through some of the things that you guys put out there in social media, or all the things that you guys do. I've learned a lot, and I'm excited to learn some more tonight. So let's get to it right away. So how this is going to work is I'm going to ask a question, and we'll all kind of tackle it one by one, and then we'll kind of dive into conversation if we so choose afterward. And then for the couple that are on here, if you'd like to ask any questions at the end for our panelists to answer, you can go ahead and type those in the group chat, and we'll get to that at the end here. But let's get to it right now. The first question I got for you guys is, if your staff could only be good at a couple things, what would they be? Ro, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I think if it's, a couple of things, and for just simplicity, it would be to compete, have a competitive edge to yourself, as an individual, as a group, to understand, to go out there, be able to battle, be able to face adversity, be able to overcome obstacles, as it relates to what, your own individual development, as it relates to in-game competition. I think if we started there, that kind of puts us in a good place. And if I was to add anything to that, where, to kind of maybe enhance, the ability to go ahead and win in games, would be just to have the attribute to command a baseball. If you give me a compete level and the ability to throw the ball where you want, you don't necessarily have to have the best stuff. You can execute, locate, change eye level. You can, make batters uncomfortable, and then regardless of what your secondary stuff is, you can use it for show me. And if you're commanding your secondary stuff, then, it's still going to be effective as well, so, you give me a staff that competes and can, throw the ball where they want to, not necessarily just throw strikes, but throw the ball where they want to, command over control. I'd be very happy with that, with a staff that's capable of those two things.
I love it. I love it. Heath, what do you got to weigh in on that?
So, yeah, right off the bat, the compete, the big thing, we talk a lot about throwing the ball with intent and, just being our best self out there. And then, I'd say, we lived on intent, commanding our fastball and, being just under a 1-4 with runners on base. Those are very simple things that the whole pitching staff kind of understood, and we kind of had to get better at throughout the year. But, coming back to, commanding your fastball, regardless if you're a guy that goes out there and throws 80% fastballs or you're a guy that throws 20% fastballs, you got to be able to go out there and command that pitch. There's not too many guys that go out there and throw 100% breaking balls or changeups. So.
Awesome. Awesome. Steve, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I think what both Scott and Chris said about, helping guys find what they're, who they are on the mound for them to be able to compete at their best. I think that's obviously at the foundation of what each guy needs to come into college, being able to do. But some of the things that I kind of thought about in terms of this were the two of the biggest things that I really try to work on development-wise with freshmen that come in right away are being able to command the fastball to both sides of the plate. I think we all probably have seen, you you have a pitcher that's out there and you're calling a game for him, and if he's having trouble commanding the fastball to one side of the plate, you just see the swing start to get super comfortable. It just kind of opens up a lot more opportunities for the hitter to be able to see pitch as well, sit on something that they like and hit it hard. So, I think we've all seen that. Being able to command the fastball on both sides of the plate is huge. Up, down, important, yeah, but that's one thing that we focus on a ton is both sides of the plate with it, keep hitters guessing a little bit. And then, I think what Chris said, being able to just throw your off-speed pitches in the zone for strikes a ton is the other thing that I think about too, because you're able to throw off-speed pitches in the zone and all of a sudden you got hitters off balance. So those are kind of the two things that, in my mind, development-wise for 18-year-olds coming into our program, that's kind of what I think about as primary things.
That's great stuff. Great stuff. Rob, what do you got to weigh in here? What do you got for us?
Well, I think what we're all hinting at pretty much is what are we all doing at creating it or going about to create an identity? And I mean, an identity can be defined as what are we better than everybody else at? So, like, what are we doing as a coaching staff to create an identity, whether it's around our entire staff or what is the individual's goal or what is their identity? What are they better at? So I think if we could be really good at one thing as a staff, it would be creating a goal that is reachable and attainable, measurable, smart, all the adjectives and directives that you want around what each guy has to attain, and make sure that it can be attainable. So what we would be really good at is really based on what the individual is or what they are really good at themselves. So we got to create that identity, and then hopefully along the lines that creates an identity as a staff that we're just going to go out and, like you guys said, compete and be able to put ourselves in a really, really good chance to win ball games.
I love it. Some great stuff right away. Let's move on to the second question here. From a mentality standpoint, what is your goal for your staff? What do you want them to do, and is there a way to develop it? So that's kind of a three-part question. What is your goal for your staff? What are you looking to have them do mentally, and how do you want them to develop it? Steve, you want to start us?
Yeah, so I think what we talk about in our program a ton, we use the word attack as our mantra almost. And so, attacking is sort of the mentality that we try to go after all the time. And it ends up being a pretty versatile mantra for us too, because I mean, one phrase that our guys will hear, me say all the time is attack the strike zone, fearlessly attack the hitter. I think it ends up creating guys throwing with conviction. It helps guys, get ahead in the count, get quick outs, all those things. There's just sort of that attack mentality. And, we even use it talking about, hey, you're going to attack your task of development for the day, whether it's a pen or it's your long toss. Attack what you're about to do right now. And I think that helps us kind of, get the most out of it, put some energy and some, emotion into it and get the most out of it for the day. And, I think in terms of like how you develop that, I think we just talk about it a ton. Every coach on our staff talks to our pitchers and talks about attacking the zone, talks about it, hey, attack your task for the day here. And I think when, Rob Smith was a guy, he's at Ohio, and I heard him say this a couple years back. I thought it was the best thing ever. He just said, when you talk about things as a staff a ton, when they are brought up and discussed over and over again, those are the things that you end up being good at as a team. So that's just kind of what we always think about is I think the best way to develop it is you just talk about it a ton.
Awesome. Rob, what do you got for us?
So we've had a lot of time on our hands as of recently. I think we can all agree. So I've actually had a chance to go back and kind of self-reflect on this aspect of the game. And I can honestly say to a point that it was definitely we didn't do a really good job with the mental side of the game. And by the time that we actually started to incorporate more of what we wanted to be from the mental side and what we are trying to identify ourselves as from the mental side, it just wasn't, it was just too late, plain and simple. By the time we did start to talk about it, we want to be dogs. I mean, you know, we're Siena Saints, but our mascot is a Saint Bernard. We want to be a dog. We want to be a dog in every fight. You know, they get backed into a corner, they're going to fight their way out of it. We want to be able to step on the mound with conviction and be able to command or do whatever we want to do in every single opportunity that we're handed. So that's what we want them to do. Now, I think the mental side can go into multiple different prongs. For me personally, back when I played, I was probably a little too confident when I was on the rubber. But we have guys on the staff that are very docile, and they're just going to carve you like a Swiss Army knife. You know, it's kind of from the mental side, we want to make sure that we're accommodating both the guys that are going to go out there and they're going to put their lives on the line every time they toe the rubber versus, you know, the guys that are going to take their time in between pitches and be able to dominate. So you got to be able to accommodate both sides of that mental game, and make sure that we're attacking each and every single guy's mental game individually. And I think personally, from my standpoint, from where I was this past year and moving forward, there's going to be some big changes for the mental side at Siena. And that is the direction that I would definitely take our program, is making sure that we are attacking the mental side with who you want to be and who is your best self when you toe the rubber.
I think that's a really good point. Really good point. Heater.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously, you know, we talk a lot about competing and throwing the ball with conviction and intent, and the mental side, you know, and, you know, I think, you know, when we are talking about attacking, we're talking about not being afraid to get hit. Okay. We're trying to go out there and get swings, you know, and I tell a lot of our guys, hey, 3 pitches or less. You should be out there 3 pitches or less. You're going out there and getting outs. Okay. And that's how much we want to attack the strike zone. And that obviously goes back to command and what everything you talk about, work on. But, you know, as far as working on that kind of stuff, you know, huge when it comes to our catch play. Okay. Every time you throw a baseball, you have to be able to go out there and throw the ball with intent. If you're going out there and half-assing your catch play and doing things, you know, along those lines, how are you supposed to go out there in a game when things are actually happening out there and the game speeds up and there's actual pressure applied? How are you going to go out there and be able to handle that? So I think, you know, putting more pressure on them in catch play, you know, doing things along the lines as far as intent bullpens where, you know, we're not even working on anything mechanical and they're making adjustments based on their mindset and be like, challenge them to do certain things. You know, we even go as far as doing competitive bullpens where guys are going against each other, you know, trying to execute pitches, you know, out of velocity or guys similar to their level. And it's like, hey, like there's something on the line here and you got to go out there and compete. And, you know, so I think that's a big thing of how we're starting to kind of trend and develop, our staff as far as competitiveness goes.
Awesome. Rojas, take us home on this one.
So I think, you know, you're starting to hear a common theme here is what, you know, as to what the messaging is or the mentality is. You hear a lot of the attack perception, and you hear a lot of having intent. And I think, I mean, that's where the baseline is at for me as well. You know, I think that's where it starts. And I think if you want to maybe shift the thought process up from a mindset, it's about, you know, and it all correlates to what competing is, but, you know, winning, right? So, you know, having the mindset of winning, what does that mean? That means, you know, everything you do should be with the intent of you challenging yourself to do it at quality, right? So, you know, I love that Scott mentioned, you know, the catch play. I love the perception of working on your bullpens with some type of, you know, intense approach. I think at the end of the day, though, you know, when a kid does something well, providing him with a consistent message of, hey, you did it once, now do it again, right? And challenging himself that way mentally, you know. So this way he gets to identify what it is that he wants to accomplish, you know, and once he's getting that feel and that understanding of, well, hey, this is what it looks like, this is what the result is, you know, it starts to become a little more, he starts to develop a little more self-awareness, right? So, I think if I looked at it from that perspective, have the mindset of winning, doing everything in between, how we develop that is by doing everything with that intent and challenging ourselves, on a daily basis, on every rep that we encounter ourselves with. And then providing them that message that, hey, that's it right there. When we see it, when we've noticed it as a coach, help them realize it as well, so that they can gain that confidence and that comfort level with it.
Ro, you said something to me a few years back, and I think about this all the time. You said to me that, I'd rather throw the wrong pitch with conviction than throw the right pitch with hesitation, and that goes back to intent level and everything that we do. And that seems to be, the reoccurring theme throughout all four of what you guys said is throwing the ball with conviction, throwing the ball with intent, and working on commanding your stuff. And I love it. I love it. So, Ro, I'm going to kick back to you for this one. In your playing career, coaching career, either one of them, what's one thing for you that you felt was a game changer? What's one teaching point that you'd say that changed the trajectory of my career?
I think I think all of us as athletes can probably point to several instances. I don't think there's ever just one thing that gets us going, right? But I think if I was to point to the one that started it all for me, it was not necessarily a teaching moment with on-field action. It was probably, being a young freshman, being called into the office to speak with our head coach, Bob Hirschfield at the time at New York Tech, and him, challenging me a way to make me look at things a little bit differently. And essentially what happened was, without being too candid, he said that I had potential, right? And I was capable of many things. At this time, I was still a two-way guy in college. I was an infielder who was dabbling in pitching. And, he said, you have potential. And he asked me, he goes, do you know what potential means? And, like any smart kid any kid who thinks he's smart at 19, right, or 18 years old, you start to tell him, yeah, I know what potential means. And here I am about to try to explain to him or give him the definition of potential. Before I get the first word out my mouth, he tells me to shut the hell up. So he goes, potential means you haven't done anything yet. So once I was told that potential means I hadn't done anything yet, I think that a light bulb went off in my head and forced me to start looking at things a little bit differently. I wanted to now achieve my goals. I didn't want to just have potential. So the conversation went a little more, it was a little more direct than that, but I think, for PG purposes, we'll keep it there. But I think that was a turning point for me, and something that kind of triggered something in my mindset as to, what I wanted to accomplish going forward, so that
awesome.
I would point to that. Yeah.
Awesome. I always love that story. Heater, what do you got?
Well, when we're talking about changing moments and, I can't really put my hand on one, but when it comes down to what I teach now and, how we kind of handle the pitching staff and what I want them to understand and learn is, I had a lot of experience being a two-way player in college. So I kind of see the game from both sides. There's so many different ways to look at the game, and it really just helps me, be able to relate to the pitchers when they're doing certain things. And, I can see a whole nother side of it from a hidden perspective too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a huge thing. And then honestly, just failing, in college and, throughout your career, when you fail, you're forced to do certain things, make changes, whether it's a, mentality standpoint or a physical standpoint, or you got to find a way to ultimately go out there and win. And, so I think those two are huge things that throughout my career that happened that, I think are important. So.
Awesome. And before I go on, Ro, I wasn't totally sure which direction you were going to go. I, knowing you for so many years, I had my own predictions as to what story you were going to go with on that one. The other one.
Listen, I think, I just, and to elaborate on that. So, because as it relates to coaching now, I think, it's about challenging our guys, right? About shifting the thought process a little bit, and giving them the belief and confidence that they should have so they can try to, attain what it is that they want to accomplish. So, it's something that can be shared.
Absolutely, absolutely. But where I was going was, the other story that you tell so often is that you learned so much from your first 2 years at Tech when you were not playing. You were not playing the game. And it's our failures, or when we have an opportunity to step back, that's an opportunity for us to also grow as well too. And I love that story as well, and I think that pairs really well with what Scott was just saying now, that our failures can be our own best teachers, in addition to our successes. Rob, what do you got to weigh in here?
Well, I'll go about this two-pronged. From a playing side of things, I had a similar conversation with my head coach. I went junior college on to Binghamton. I played under Coach Raz up at Herkimer, and if any of you guys do know Coach Raz, he's a very animated, fun guy to be around. But when you're playing under him, there tends to be a spark or a fire that's lit. And well, to be honest, I was a small fish in a very big pond coming out of high school, and by a very small, or sorry, excuse me, a big fish in a very small pond. And when I went to Herkimer, you think that you're something because you had all these fun things that you did in high school, and people around your town know you, but you come to find out that there's some guy from the middle of nowhere, New York, that's a lot smaller than your hometown, that's gonna step on the bump, and he's gonna pump 92, and you realize really quickly that you're no longer in a very small pond. You've moved on. So the conversation with Coach Raz at the end of the fall was much the same conversation that I'm sure we've all had with some of our athletes, and it was a very big wake up call. To put it candidly, he pretty much told me, you're lucky someone else went home because you were the next guy in line to go home, which means that my playing career could have ended right then and there, and I would have just been left high and dry, and there goes the cleats. But luckily, that lit a fire. Things changed, and my attitude about baseball changed. My attitude about preparation changed. The way I went about my daily life changed due to that conversation. So from a playing standpoint, I turned back to that conversation with Coach Raz, and ultimately that fall is a huge changing point to what I did for the rest of my playing career. And then moving into my coaching career, there comes a point in time where we've all been there. We all think that we know a lot more than we do, and we realize, there's a lot more to this baseball world than what we're doing in, central New York or anywhere in the Northeast, and we gotta expand our knowledge. So just from a standpoint of the coaching side of things, I hit a sticking point at Bloomsburg after my first year where I was very stuck in my ways on how we're going to go about a throwing program and kind of conceptualizing everyone into a singular box. And then come to find out, we have really good, talented guys on our team that aren't progressing at the rate at which you would expect them to. And you have to step away and step back and pretty much say, or what am I doing wrong that is hindering these guys, and what are we going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And that is, I think, the continuing learning portion of this. And like we've already discussed, we've had plenty of time on our hands. So the continuing learning from, peers around the baseball game that are giving free knowledge right now is huge. And how we can advance, it's not advancing our careers. I think we get stuck in that mindset that we are the ones that are advancing our careers. The people that advance our careers are our players. And our players are the ones that we need to focus on. So what education are we giving ourselves so that we can now teach our guys? I mean, on our pitching staff alone, we have 15 guys. That means we have 15 different personalities. And if I was putting all 15 into one box, then I was missing out on development for all 15 of these guys, or maybe only hitting development on one of these guys. So I think, from a changing standpoint, or what was, a turning point in in both my playing career, it'd be Herkimer, and my coaching career would be, after that first year at Herkimer or at Bloomsburg, where I was like, what am I doing wrong? And how can I make sure that this never happens again? And it goes into making sure that we are continually learning so that, like I said, we can better our players. It's not bettering our careers. It's bettering our players. It's their 4 years. I don't know about you guys, but my 4 years of college playing is over and done with. I can't go back and change anything. It is what it is. So I think that's what we need to continually remember.
That's awesome stuff. Steve.
Yeah, I think like a big theme of what is coming out of a lot of these stories I'm hearing from you guys is it's like in a lot of ways it's like some wake up calls, right? It's almost like you get slapped in the face a little bit, or you get some reality poured over you, and that kind of snaps you into a new kind of behavior. And I think a lot of times for pitchers in college, and I've seen this, from when I was a player, myself, teammates, guys I've coached all across the board. I think the things that end up snapping guys into maybe a whole new level of work ethic in their careers end up being kind of stagnant velocity and getting hit around, like your stuff's just not good enough. And then also being able to stay healthy, just constant injuries. So those are two things I think kind of end up slapping guys in the face a little bit. And I think what ends up happening a lot of times, I think guys end up really, really owning their process and their work that they do in the weight room to try to achieve. I mean, there's a whole palette of things you're trying to achieve in the weight room, but some of the most important things I think are staying healthy, and getting a certain strength base to the point where I am now strong enough to throw the baseball X miles per hour. I mean, I think there's a pretty steady correlation there. There's always oddities here and there. You got the kid that can move the house in the weight room and he's stuck throwing the ball 83, 84. And sometimes you got string beans that are 90 to 92 or whatever. But for me, that's one thing that I just see with guys all the time is all of a sudden when they take on a whole new attitude in the weight room and then develop that strength base that they really need, whether it's in order to start throwing fuzz or finally stay healthy. That's when I think you see guys' careers take off a little bit. And it can be, it can be a slow process. Sometimes like I know for me, when I walked in the weight room as a freshman, I couldn't even do a pull-up. I barely still can. I was really weak in the upper body. Just all sorts of things where there were guys in the weight room that were outperforming me. And as soon as I kind of looked myself in the mirror and said, if I'm ever going to be as good as I want to be, I need to actually totally change my mindset in here and try to be the best guy in the weight room as well as, on the field.
That's great. So again, recurring theme talking about, a lot of times in our lives, where we've haven't been where we wanted to be and having that wake up call. But, I've had plenty of those, myself, and I think I failed more than many people in this room. And if you're going to argue that, it'd only be because you played the game longer than I did. But a wake-up call can also be sometimes somebody else believing in you before you really believe in yourself. And some of the people that are on this call right now, I see Jimmy just jumped on too, and Ro, you're on here obviously too. You guys believing in me before I ever believed in myself. That was, I never thought I could be a coach at one point in my life. And I'm sure there's plenty of pitchers that, aren't sure if they're going to be successful, aren't sure if they can get out there and do it. And providing a belief in them by believing in them first and foremost and showing them that you care, I think can be a great service and can be a great wake-up call for them as well too, that, hey man, you can be good, and you can be good. You're going to have to work at it, and we're going to have to do this, and we're going to have to do that. But I think that's a great message for people to hear, and for teammates out there too, believing in your teammates and giving them positive reinforcement, being, constructive in your criticism, and pushing each other to be better. I think those are all great things that can really change the trajectory of somebody's career. There's plenty of literature out there, plenty of stories about, hey, somebody came up to me one day and they said this, You know, when I was, without getting long-winded about myself, when I was, what was it now, 21 years old, you know, Lou Petrucci came up to me, who many of us know from seeing him around, and told me that in 2 years I was going to become a college coach. And 2 years later, I became a college coach. And I thought he was out of his mind for even thinking that. So one person could really change the way you think about everything. And I think that that's such a great opportunity that we have as a coach to be able to share that with the players that we work with. So that's something that I wanted to kind of add in here. We're going to shift gears a little bit. I want to start talking about some technology. I want to start talking about some training tools or things that you specifically do with your pitchers. What are some ways that you implement technology for your pitching staff or training tools that you do with our guys? And it could be only a couple of them, or it could be, you know, the masses of your pitching staff. Rob, do you want to start us here?
Sure. So I think the number one tool that we have at our disposal is the very small device that's sitting right next to me. It's our cellular devices. Our phone's cameras do a phenomenal job now at picking up, frame by frame imaging of whatever we're trying to look at. And I know Steve will get into it, so I don't want to steal Steve's thunder, but I sent him a DM, I believe, or a text, I can't remember, about a video that he posted on his Twitter page, and he was seeing the ball out of the hand of one of his pitchers very well. So I texted him and was like, hey, how are you doing this? Like, what's going on? And could you help me out with this? And he did a phenomenal job, and it kind of opened up, a doorway into pitch design, low budget pitch design, for our pitching staff, and potentially what it could do for, if you want to use some of the catchphrases now, spin efficiency and, spin axis and so on and so forth. But, the cell phone for videoing pitchers, whether it's mechanics or ball flight out of the hand, or ball flight from the hand to the catcher, depending on the angle that you're looking for. Cell phone's a great thing. We use and implement a form of, and I'm sure most of you guys do, but Google Docs to implement, their throwing programs, and individualize it that way, so it doesn't take hours, or walking up and down the strength or the stretch line and saying, how do you feel today, and go on. And from there, it gives the guys a little bit of freedom to edit their own throwing program, so on and so forth. But I mean, that goes into, I guess, training tools would be, we implement driveline, if you will, driveline weighted balls, or weighted balls in general, and plyos, and honestly, low budget, you could use PVC pipes or nails and baseballs to add some weight. And honestly, you can drill holes through baseballs to take some weight out. Training tools are endless, but it's individualized based on what the guy needs and what they're looking to do and accomplish based on their goals. So I guess that would be scratching the surface to what technology and training tools we use.
That's great insight. Heater, what do you got to add to that?
There's tons of stuff out there, obviously, that you can use. But I think if we're sitting here strictly looking at, this new technology of synergy that, we have access to now. And I'm sure some programs do and some programs don't, but, it's such a valuable tool to use for our staff, because, we can literally sit there and look at every single game pitch that you threw. Okay. And we can break it down however we want, and use the data sitting in front of us to kind of help, design, hey, this is what you're really good at. This is what you're not good at. And let's try to, stick to our strengths and to how we actually want to go out there and pitch. There could be a guy, I'll just throw, Nick Sinacola's name out there, who was our Friday guy this year. We're talking about last year. He had, when he threw a fastball down in the zone, he got 0 swing and misses. When he threw a fastball up, he was close to 40, and he didn't understand that. Okay. And so it's like, okay, well, let's use this to our benefit. We can throw the ball up in the zone here, and it really goes down to, it's basically, using a wrap soda machine without it in front of you. And you can literally sit there and break down, okay, you're a sinker slider guy, you're a 4-seam breaking ball guy, and really allows them to kind of stick to their strengths and gives us data and proof in front of us, be like, hey, this is what works for you, and hey, this doesn't work for you. So I think that's a huge tool, for us that we use.
No, I love it, and I love talking about synergy all day long. In the days before synergy, and for those that don't have it, it takes a lot more legwork. And I used to go on. I was using Zoom at that point, recording all of our games on ESPN3 afterward, because they'd be up for a little bit, screen record it, and then cut it up from there. Or take some work with having a student assistant, or somebody's charting some things in the dugout. Or taking video of bullpens or whatever it might be. I was doing a lot of that, my first year here, but there's other avenues to do that are inexpensive, that basically yield the same results of what Scott's talking about here. But there's endless opportunities with what we're doing with that. And I think it made a huge difference on our staff already. Steve, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm glad that Scott brought up the synergy. It's one thing that when Rob and I were talking about it in the summer, I was really excited for it. I couldn't wait to start using it. And in my head, I was just kept thinking about how this is a scouting report tool. I'm going to be watching other teams do this. And then, just a few games into the spring, I'm sitting there talking to Rob about how, I'm getting more out of just watching our guys as much as anything I've ever done by using synergy. And I think Scott was talking about this. I think there's no better feedback for a pitcher than to rewatch his outing, because he has to be really, really honest with himself. Rewatching footage of yourself, it doesn't lie. There's a lot of things, I think, throughout your outing when you're in the heat of competition that you don't realize are happening until you're able to rewatch it. Like, there's so many times when you give up a double in the gap that ends up being the difference in the game, and a kid will tell you, hey, I hit my spot there. He put a good swing on it. You go back and look at the tape, and it was belt high right down the middle. And there's just some things that you can pick up that you don't notice in real time. And then like Rob said, I'm pretty gung-ho about the slow-mo video. I bring my phone out to do slow-mo video, probably on too much stuff, a little bit of overkill, I think. But there's just so many benefits, I think, where you can get a kid right out of the hand. You can see spin really, really well. And then my big thing with it is in real time, you can go ahead and show them, hey, this is exactly what it looked like coming out of your hand, trajectory on that last changeup, slide, or 2-seam that you threw or whatever. And it just helps them understand a connection between this is what I felt, this is what's really happening, versus what my perception of it was. Just kind of links it together. And I think the development process for pitch design is just escalated by it.
Absolutely. I mean, as you said, the video is not going to lie. The data points they're not going to lie either, and it allows us to further the learning experience for our guys and create more buy-in. And that's something, Heater, you did a good job with this fall. Some of your teaching points, we had backed by data, like you talked about being a 1.4 below to the plate. We showed our guys that when they were above a 1.4, and we threw out 2% of runners, right? And when they were below a 1.4, we threw out 48% or something like that. So having that data point to go and tell your staff, hey, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, creates that much more of a learning experience for them. Ro, what do you got to finish us off here on this question?
So I think, what I find interesting about the technology aspect of this is Rob said something earlier about, a coach having to learn, right? He needs to continue learning. And I think that's even more prevalent today than any other time probably in our game. I'm probably aging myself a little bit here. When I played it collegiately or I played professionally, none of this was around. And although I felt like I had a wealth of knowledge, from my professional experience, and I was able to maybe convey some of that in a message to a kid to help them, some of these new technologies, can help reinforce that messaging, or can help, open up my eyes to certain things that I need to kind of be aware of, right? So, that requires, as a coach, to learn what these technologies are capable of, right? So I think that was a great message from Rob as it relates to coaching. But, just on the technology side, what we're doing at Tech, we do implement the driveline protocols. We try to segment guys into different, protocols depending on what we think we need from them or what we think they need to better themselves. We don't just rely on that. We have the conversation with them. Some guys don't feel comfortable with the program, and that's okay also, right? We don't want to push somebody to do something that's not, in their wheelhouse just yet. Maybe over time, maybe a freshman comes in, he's just not physically capable or physically fit enough to handle the protocol. So, he has to develop his strength and he has to physically mature so that he can handle that maybe for, down the line or in the future. We're also, we also are using the Rapsoda technology, and a lot of times, we try to, I try to limit the use of it, because what concerns me sometimes is that, and I think anybody can probably relate to this, is, it's like when you have the radar gun out there, what do kids try to do? They try to go ahead and throw to the radar gun as hard as possible in a session, in a session, or in a bullpen environment, and that may be taken away from what it is we're trying to accomplish as it relates to their delivery, or as it relates to a certain pitch development. And although the Rapsoda has that ability to kind of translate that for you, I'm careful not to have the guys dive too far down that rabbit hole, because then I think they get caught up in certain things that may be too far ahead of them, or something that, they start to lose focus as to what really matters, right? And when it comes to competing, or when it comes to understanding body awareness, and you're delivering what you're trying to repeat on a day-to-day basis, but we toy around with it, but I think the one tool that we have used with a high level of success to this point, since I've been coaching, is the Modus technology. I had the fortunate experience of working with Brian Gales, who's he's a liaison of Modus, and has all this knowledge, and he was able to share it with me, and set up our program with the ability to monitor our guys and monitor their workload and monitor their health, and have a clearer picture as to where they're at in terms of health, and what they can or cannot tolerate, how we can modify their throwing programs based on what we're seeing because of the information or the data that's being collected. Having that one-on-one conversation with them, after looking over their files to see, hey, this is what I'm seeing, a spike here in your acute to chronic ratio, and how are you feeling, and maybe starting that conversation earlier with them, as it relates to their health. Because what happens too many times is, we rely sometimes on the kid to just come up to us and tell us, hey, I'm not feeling great. Or, or we look at a clicker and we think, hey, he's at 100 pitches, or he's south of 100 pitches, he can keep going. But, in reality, maybe he's not. Maybe his arm is not, up to that task. And I think the Modus sleeve has kind of helped, broaden the sights a little bit, and allow for the program as a whole to, one, stay healthy, and sometimes even challenge guys, because we think, guys are overworked, and it turns out, maybe he's not overworked because the data says different. And then have that conversation with him as well, because I think we all have experience where maybe we need to utilize a guy in some high leverage situations, more than we like, or feel comfortable doing so. And, for this, because we're in a competitive environment. And I think what the Modus sleeve has done for our program is it's told us, hey, you know what, we're not in a safe space with this kid, or, this guy can take on a bigger workload, you know? So that's just one of the things I think has been, functional for us.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to move on here to the next question. Great insight, Ro. This next question is twofold. So what are some things that you want your entire staff to do, or you have your entire staff do? And what are some things that are left up to the individual? Steve, would you like to start us with this one?
Yeah, I think there's some principles, like there's some staples that I like to have every single pitcher in our program do when it comes to some of the things that we do training wise. Some sort of a long toss program with some pull downs to a radar gun, plyo throws, the plyo throw series, the wrist weight series, J bands. I mean, there's a lot of like pre-throwing body prep type stuff when it comes to the throwing program that I feel pretty strongly that it benefits every single guy in some of them in different ways. But, sometimes we get pretty uniform in terms of that stuff, but, there's certainly no absolutes. I think a lot of us are experiencing now, there's so many high school kids that are coming into the college level who actually already do have a pretty good understanding of some of the things they're doing routine wise and have established routines that they've maybe been doing 2-3 years already and have led to some success for them. And so I think that's always important to keep in mind. Now, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes kids come in, maybe they're hard-headed and they like to do some things a certain way, and you have to communicate with them on changing those things, whether it's drills or whatever else. But I mean, I just think at the end of the day, it's important to make sure that if there is something that a particular kid likes to do in his training, in his daily practice routine, that actually does help him, be successful, then who am I to say, hey, no, it's going to be my way or the highway, and we're going to do it this way. So there's certainly been some times in my coaching career so far where there's been some kids who have certain things that they like to do that I either didn't know much about or I didn't necessarily have that great of an opinion of it to begin with. And it's gone both ways, where either that guy has had a ton of success continuing to do that and it's benefited him, mm-hmm. Or you could tell, after a couple weeks that, hey, no, I think we're going to have a conversation and try to corral things and curb them a little bit more to what I see and what I'm comfortable with. But I'll just say quick, there's a guy that we had at Siena who's pitching in pro ball now, who as a freshman, I won't say he was stubborn, but he was very, very hard in his thinking and had some really, really strong beliefs and instilled routines about some of the things that he did in his throwing program. And he was super involved with some of the Tom House philosophies and things like that. And that's one thing that I just didn't know all that much about at that time when he was playing for me. And it was actually really cool because he was really hard-headed, I thought, early on. And I thought there was a little bit of discourse between us, but it just came down to constant communication between the two of us all the time. Hey, I'd like you to do this because I think it's going to be better for you. And he would have those kinds of conversations with me as well. And this is why I like to do this. This is why it benefits me. And it just ended up being really cool because there was growth on both sides of it, I thought. There were a lot of things that he came back down on and started doing some things that I wanted him to do. And then there were some things that I went, you know what? I really like that you do this, man. And you know what? I think I'm gonna actually start having some other guys do it because I can see the benefits of it. So, there's never any, there's never any set in stone agenda on it, but that's kind of how we go about things.
Awesome. Rojas, what do you got for us?
I think the one requirement my staff has is you have to play catch with a purpose. And Scott mentioned this earlier, but playing catch with a purpose is non-negotiable at the program. That's the only thing. Everything outside of that, it's a conversation that, open to any ideas. But the ability to go out there on a day-to-day basis and play catch with the intent to get better, and every rep you have and every throw you make is with that intent and that singular intent, I think is what leads to a sound foundation. I think it's what leads to consistency. I think it's what leads to the ability to translate it onto the mound. You know, and you know, all of us in this room, you know, can probably look back at either our playing careers, early coaching careers, or some point in time in the game where, you know, the message usually is, hey, go down the line and get loose, right? Or go get warmed up. And that message doesn't scream, go get better, right? That's just, you know, it's almost like an action. That's all it is, right? And when I talk to my guys, look, the warming up and the getting loose is your stretch and your dynamic stuff, all right? Once we get past that and you pick up that baseball, the first throw you make, I don't care if the guy's 30 feet away, 60 feet away, 90 feet away, that first throw starts. That's when your work starts. That's when your intent to get better starts. And playing catch with a purpose is the one thing that we as a staff, we focus on a day-to-day basis. And I think what it allows for is it allows for guys to now start having some more awareness as to what it is that they're trying to accomplish. They start to make adjustments because they're trying to repeat the same thing over and over. And all of that, like as I mentioned earlier, it starts to translate to the mound, because the biggest thing in this game is adjustments, regardless of what it is that you do, right? The biggest thing in this game is the ability to adjust. And when you play catch with that type of approach, I think you start to speed up that adjustment process for yourself as an individual, right? So, I mean, much like what Steve said, though, outside of that, I mean, hey, you know, whatever else works for you, I'm open for, I'm game for. You know, I'm going to lay out some suggestions. I'm going to hear you out. I'm going to, you know, either based on experience or watching what you're doing, going to maybe provide you with a different direction if I think it's needed. You know, our bullpen sessions, you know, ideally we have a routine, but there's times when I tell those guys, hey, whatever you want to do, go out there and throw whatever it is you want to work on today. Because I don't know what he's feeling. I don't know what he's always thinking. So he may have the intent of wanting to work on his changeup more today, and I don't want to take that opportunity away from him, because we don't get on the mound that frequently where, you know, we're gonna, you know, they're gonna have that freedom all the time. So I want them to, you know, to feel liberated when they, you know, they got their bullpen session. So, but the throwing and the playing catch with a purpose, that's we're not having a discussion. This is how we're doing it.
I love it. Peter, what do you got to weigh in here?
So yeah, I mean, I think a big point that, you know, Chris and Steve just made is, you know, just being able to communicate with the players and what they need. And obviously everyone, I think, needs different things. And one thing might work for this guy and one thing might not work for this guy, you know, and it could be completely different. You know, so I think just being able to develop a routine for each individual that they can go through and stick to, you know, and be comfortable with, you know, I think that's a huge piece. As far as components that go into that, you know, I want everyone to do, you know, obviously, you know, playing catch with intent, you know, throwing to targets, you know, long toss, and mound time are really big things that we kind of stress and harp on. You know, I want guys on the mound 2, 3, you know, some guys like to even go 4 times a week, even if it's not a bullpen setting, and it could be a guy coming in and just doing his drill work off the mound, you know, and things along those lines I think are huge, that kind of go into, you know, really when you're talking about developing an entire pitching staff, because everyone's going to be a little bit different. Everyone wants different things, you know. You're always going to hear, Johnny, this is the way to do it, and this is the way to do it over here, you know. So I think just being able to communicate and keep an open mind and, you know, really kind of implementing them in the direction that you want to get them to and where they want to go themselves. I think that's a huge piece.
And I think going back to what Rob said earlier, based on what you're saying there, here, and based on what I've seen, it gives those guys an identity too. It gives them an identity of, this is what I need to work on because this is the type of guy I am when I take the mound. That, I hear you say it all the time. Jimmy's going to throw different than Johnny, and we're not going to treat those guys the same. We want to get the best out of each and every one of those guys. So understanding their identity and pushing them forward, and also understanding their language. And I've seen you've been doing that a whole lot lately, and that's really helped our guys, and I know that. Rob, what do you got to weigh in here?
Yeah, real quick, Matt. I just want to, hop in and just say one piece I left out was we talk about how everyone needs different things. Well, what we started doing at Maine is we kept a notebook. Every single pitcher kept a notebook. And after their throwing sessions for the day, or for the week, they could write one cue they're kind of picking up as the, hey, I'm doing this really well right now, or I feel really good doing this. And they write it in their language. And, and 2-3 months go by. Now they have 5-10 things in their notebook that they can just look at, when they're feeling off. They're like, oh, and something just as simple as, whether it's my back heel or whether, it's a mental thing, might put them back into the groove and be like, okay, that's all it was. You know what I mean? So, sorry. Go ahead.
I like that notebook idea. That's a great idea. I mean, I've heard it implemented a bunch of different ways, but it's always, the end result is always something that you can go back to and look on when things are going good or when things are going bad, even just to as a mental checklist of what you need to do to get better. But from a staff mandatory perspective, I guess, one staple in our program is everybody needs to warm up, plain and simple, and that's prior to any pitcher-specific thing. There always seems to be a bad stigma around a dynamic warm-up that's associated to our game and the way we play. And guys kind of tend to half-ass it. So if you want to go into the things that we look for intent-wise, it's, hey, once you show up to the field, it's time to show intent from the time our feet are touching the grass. And that goes into the dynamic warm-up and how we prepare for what we are going to do for the rest of the day. And that's definitely been, one of my sticking points. From an individual side of things, plyos are optional. We have a couple of guys that don't like to throw weighted implements, and then some guys love it. Who am I to say, go out and pick up this, 1 pound green ball and do a pivot pick, with it. I can't do that with everybody. It would do injustice. Now, if, like we've all discussed, if, down the line further, we notice, arm path issues and health issues and so on and so forth, and that, 1 pound weighted implement, or, I'm using 1 pound an example, but, all of the driveline plyos or the weighted baseballs, if we can find a use for that implement into that individual's training program, then that is where the suggestions begin. But for the most part, all of our guys take part in some form of plyo program. Then another part of our throwing program, it more or less depends on the year. I like what Steve said about, guys have to do pull downs and long toss, and there has to be a radar gun so it's measurable and trackable. But for me, that more or less depends on the time of the year, and I'm sure it does for all of us. The time of year is dependent. In the spring season, you're not going to have our guys go out and throw long toss and then pull downs into a net and then expect them to go out and, on the weekend and compete. You might have just had 2 heavy workload days into their program that they might not otherwise be ready for. But for us, one of the staples of our program turns into the long toss and weighted ball and pull down program is our individualized time, or the individuals. Then it becomes very, very staple into our program that this is our time to make sure that we are building our arm strength and, possibly correcting any arm issues that we have. But a lot of that is we need to be able to move fast with intent. And one thing that I do want to go back to is what Ro was saying, and I think we can all agree on one thing. The intent to play catch is huge. one thing that Coach Foles at Binghamton used to tell our team all the time is that the team that wins is usually the team that plays the best catch. So if you're not putting your intent behind the catch play that you're going to have, you're probably not going to be the best team on the field, and you're probably not going to win many ball games. And that's plain and simple. I think that needs to be said more often, that the intent to play good, great, and perfect catch needs to be higher than just a warm-up. So I love what Coach Rose said there about the intent to play catch, and you guys both, Steve and Scott, both agreed with it, and I 100% agree with it too. And I think that just needs to be emphasized even more.
It's a lot of great points. I love the first point in addition to the other points that you made as well too. But I love the first point especially because if we're talking about playing catch with intent, everything that we do as soon as we put on the uniform should be with intent. That's something that we talk about with our position players this year. That if they're looking to get faster, when they're going through their dynamic warm up and they're doing their A skips or their B skips or whatever it might be, that's an opportunity to get better. The ones that really want to have success, if you truly want it, I take a look at Jeremy Pena for an example. That's a guy that had a lot of success. He was on here last night on one of these calls. Watch him do anything from an A skip to how he's doing his hip mobility to things that aren't directly involved with baseball but help with baseball. He takes them all seriously because he wants to get better. And those are the types of guys that have a lot of success in the long run. So I love that point. I'm going to wrap this up with one final question here. Actually, I'm gonna go off the plan for a second. I'm gonna throw you guys a curveball. I figure it's good for a pitching podcast. You guys are all great competitors, or get very into it as coaches. Sorry, one of our former calling me.
Come on, Matt.
No, it's Danny. If he wants to talk to me, I'll talk to him later. My question to you guys is, when you look out on the mound from your players, or you look out on the mound from your teammates as another member of a staff back in the day, what do you want to see from that guy? What are some things that you look for in terms of what he looks like, what he's doing? What fires you up when you see somebody out there on the mound, or what's something that you don't like that you see out there on the mound? Peter, what do you got?
Well, I think it goes back to a lot of the things we talked about already, but, just from, a standpoint and understanding how everyone's different, there may be a guy out there that, is really fired up, and, you see his body language and he's throwing strikes and getting outs. And then there may be another guy out there who's very calm about his approach, and, you have to maybe pump them up a little bit, but they, at the end of the day, if they go out there and throw strikes and give your team a chance to win, like that's what you're asking them to do. And just understanding, hey, there's different types of kids, not everyone you get in their face and yell at them is going to respond well, and there may be guys you need to do that too. So I think just, understanding that fine line and how people compete are different. I think that's the biggest point I'm trying to make. But you want a competitor out there and someone that's going out there throwing strikes, and when you look at the lineup card, hey, this guy's on the mound, we're going to win this game. And ultimately that's what you want. So,
right. Ro?
Presence is a big thing, right? But I think, presence is relative to the individual, right? So that's essentially what Scott's saying, right? So us as coaches have to be mindful of that. And we have to have that awareness on our end. And not all kids are going to carry themselves the same way. But I think what many young athletes struggle with is maybe not having great body language, right? And that's an easy tell, right, for us to kind of pick up on. But if you can see right away when a kid has an objective and he's out there with an initiative and he's kind of locked in and his state of mind is in a proper place. And as soon as, and as soon as he kind of falls off the rails, it's an easy sign, his body language is going to give away a lot of what he's thinking or where he's at mentally. And those are cues as coaches that we need to pick up on, right? To either get out there and maybe put them back in a proper state of mind, or have a conversation on that's going to get them, locked back in and such. But, having that presence is fundamental. And I think it allows you to sustain confidence and focus, right? So, that's what I want to see from my guys when they're out there.
Awesome. Steve.
Yeah, I think what Scott was saying is 100% correct, that it is individualized, that there are guys that compete in different ways. And I think that's really important to understand before you just start trying to implement some sort of body language or emotion or something like that. You got to understand maybe how that kid ticks a little bit. With that said, I think most of the time I've found that some guys that maybe need to change change that view of what a coach sees in them out on the mound, whether it's body language, emotion, anything like that. A lot of times for me, it's something where the body language needs to come across stronger. They need to pitch with more energy. They need to pitch with more emotion than they currently do. And I've seen guys completely transform with kind of buying into that. And for me personally, I mean, in our bullpens, this is something I just started doing this year. Is before we even throw an actual ball, we go through 5 dry throws where we are absolutely owning dominant body language, visualizing ourselves executing the pitches, but we're exhibiting dominant body language with a broad chest, with big deep breaths, catching the ball back from the catcher, and not turning our back. We're just keeping our chest facing that hitter the whole time. To me, the way I kind of like to describe it to our pitchers is, I want you to think about that batter right now being in the box, looking out at you and not being comfortable, because that looks like a guy that's about to tear his head off and compete. So I love when guys are, I can see a big broad chest, strong body language, and I love when guys pitch with emotion. I really do, because if I'm coaching and I see one of our guys punch someone out and they're pounding their fists into their glove and they're pumped up to get the ball back again, that's something I can get behind, because that kid's bought in. He loves pitching. He loves being out there. He loves competing, and it makes it fun.
Absolutely. Rob, you got anything to add to that?
Steve, if you're behind it, don't you think the rest of the team's behind it too?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
And that's a huge portion of this question. The basis behind that is, for some reason, humans have a really, really good ability to judge confidence just based on looking at an individual and where their confidence level is in themselves and their abilities at what they're doing at any given time. So us as coaches have gotten really good at identifying, guys when they are on the mound that, are pitching with confidence. They're the guys that, if you're going about your job in a docile way, they're the guys that are grabbing the ball, getting on the rubber, dominating the strike zone, the get outs, they get off the mound, they get back on, they do it all over again. But if you're an animal, you're what Steve just said. You're the guy that's, punching guys out and pounding the glove and, being enthusiastic about what you're doing. But that also goes into what Coach Rowe and Scott were saying, that, you have to individualize, your approach as to what you're going to be on the mound, and in the confidence that you show the world, I guess. And really, it just comes down to that, plain and simple: confidence in being able to get your team to back you up. To go further into that, we all, like I said, can tell when a guy loses that confidence. The shoulders slouch, the glove takes a little bit longer to move, their chins in their chest, those are the guys that we already know that aren't having the same success. And those are the guys that, you have to go out and have a conversation with, or just go out and waste some time so that the bullpen can get ready, because you need another guy out there that is going to come in with that confidence that we are all looking for.
Definitely. From a position player side of things, I mean, we all want a guy that wants the ball. You know, we want a pitcher that wants the ball, that, you know, pitches with pace, that has good presence. And, you know, as you were saying, I love your point, Rob, that you start off with, that, you know, the entire team rallies behind that, you know, that the pitcher really can dictate, you know, the flow of the game and how things are going, and the body language, not just of himself, but of his teammates as well, too. And how
Tempo is huge in that.
I'm sorry?
Tempo is huge in that.
Absolutely. Tempo is huge. And, you know, you see a lot of the teams that don't field it at as high of a clip, or are not making as many plays, or it's usually, a lot of the times, it's matched with a pitcher that's not pushing the pace or has poor body language. It's tough to be engaged when you have that going on as well, too. My final question of the night, from a preparation standpoint, what do you believe is most important to get a pitcher ready to pitch competitively? And this could be something that's mental preparation. This could be something that's physical preparation. This could be something that's game day, or something leading up to facing an opponent that weekend. Let's start with you, Rob, and then we'll circle back around.
I think that goes back into the individualized side of things, preparation for getting outs. Some guys need to go through a checklist of a certain movement, perhaps. For example, back when I played, I had certain checkpoints throughout an entire game. I was our closer at Binghamton, so I had checkpoints that I needed to meet when I was going to get ready for a certain part of the lineup, or when I was getting ready for a game. So you got to make sure you kind of meet with each guy on your staff and see what they need in preparation. We have a couple of guys on the staff that just need the mental preparation. They just need to be in tune with what is going on in the game, and then just get into that confident standpoint where I'm just going to dominate every single one of you. And there's other guys that need, you know, an hour and 30 minutes for the body, the mind, and everything else to sync up all at once to go out and get outs. And like I said, as coaches, we need to identify what each individual needs and make sure that we can accommodate those goals, so that when they do go out, they're set up for success and not set up for failure. Because to wrap it all up, this is their 4 years, and we need to make sure that we're meeting them where they are, and not where we are. Our 4 years are over. So I think that individualized aspect of what they are doing to approach an outing is crucial to make sure that they go out and get outs.
Awesome. Steve, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I'll just say, along the physical preparation side of things, I think with the idea in mind of, when it's my day to pitch, I need to feel 100%. I want to be at 100% in terms of how I feel and my energy, and how prepped my body is. And I think it all comes back to sleep, hydration, nutrition, and those types of things. And I bring that up because I just think it ends up being such an important learning curve from the time a kid is a freshman, you know, by the end of his college career. There's most college freshmen come in that do not at all have a grasp of those things and how much they can actually benefit you. And I think it just becomes so important, especially when you're talking about maybe a starting pitcher who's going to get the ball once a week, trying to go 7-8 innings and be a horse takes a huge toll on you. So the recovery after the outing, and then the preparation leading up to the next outing, the more that guys start to really buy into and see the results from proper sleep, eating really, really well, and hydrating and all that kind of stuff. For me, there's just no comparison. When kids start to really own that process, I think they start to really take off and become really consistent, because they don't have days where, I don't know, I just didn't have a good outing, I didn't feel great, I'm not really sure why. All of a sudden, you are at your best every single time you're taking the ball, because you're physically at your best.
I love it. Heater, and then we'll go to you, Rob.
Yeah, so I think, you know, just based off what you guys just said, is it's about having a routine. I think if you have a routine, and you're recovering, and you're preparing yourself, each week and every day you go out there, and you'll be prepared to go when it's your time to go. You know, if you kind of are bouncing around doing different things and not really sticking to one thing, you're right. You might feel different one day, and you might feel good one day. You might feel bad one day, and you're just never really in a groove. And ultimately, it's, you know, our job to just be able to, you know, prepare them the best we can, and you know, hopefully they take ownership in their routine, and you know, that's a big thing. It's all up to the players, you know, and to be able to take ownership in their careers. And you know, like Rob says, you know, this isn't our 4 years, this is their 4 years, and you know, they have to, you know, take pride in that, and you know, develop a routine and come up with some stuff that works for them individually.
Awesome. Ro, to finish it off, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'll segue off of that a little bit. I think, you know, routine and process obviously are paramount in terms of being able to, you know, create, you know, a successful competitive mindset. You know, I think if I'm going to add to that, I think one of the things that kids need to do, or I think would help facilitate success, is having proper visualization, right? Or confident or positive visualization. Seeing yourself doing things and accomplishing things, you know, watching yourself almost go through a lineup and watching yourself execute a pitch where you want to, and what that feels like, and only put, you know, filling your mind with, you know, those positive visions. This way, you know, you can kind of carry that into the game. You know, I think, you know, the routine aspect of it, you know, I think if you add that to your routine, you know, whatever your physical routines are, whatever your day-to-day routines are, you know, whatever, you know, we all know, you know, we hear this, you know, how baseball players are, you know, superstitious or creatures of habits and such, but, you know, the visualization aspect of it, I think, is it can take you to places that, you know, you're not really aware, you know, as it relates to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I know as a professional, when I was able to watch myself do things and play it out in my mind mentally on a consistent basis before I actually did it, you know, it lent itself, you know, for a successful path. So that's something I talk to the guys about. We do a lot of visualization work. I mean, I know Steve mentioned that in his bullpen. He's probably got guys doing visualization work. I think, you know, there should be a lot more practice on that, you know. Not enough is discussed as it relates to, you know, being in the right mental state or mindset, and being able to carry that into competition, right? You know, as it relates to, you know, getting ready to pitch competitively, man, if you can see yourself doing something good out there, you know, chances are you're going to be able to, you know, carry it out to the mound.
That's awesome. What I'd like to do now, and I know we only have a couple people that are hanging around right now, and I really appreciate, you know, you spending your Thursday night with us. But to wrap this up, I'm going to give you guys a minute. If you have any questions, okay, we got one already. Roger says, going to the technology side and being in a small Division III school with very limited budget, what do you guys think of Diamond Kinetics, Pitch Tracker? Is it worth it, especially being limited on coaching staff? Would anyone like to take that one?
I'll just say I do have just a little bit of experience with that, where I was in a similar situation where I wanted to try to get some of those numbers, but you know, we couldn't afford something higher than that. And you know, in terms of spin rate and velocity, it's pretty darn accurate. Like occasionally you'll get one that's like 5 ticks way too high, and your pitcher thinks he's, you know, a major leaguer. All of a sudden you got to bring him back down and say that wasn't right. But for the most part, when they take the Diamond Kinetics measurements in terms of spin rate alone and compare those to the Rapsodo, they're pretty darn accurate. And then, you know, the Diamond Kinetics gives you a spin direction. And to be honest, I don't really know how much value there is in that. I think it's accurate, but you know, I think you could tell most of the time just by looking at the ball and the way it moves, probably what the actual direction of it is. But I think it was important for me to just make sure I knew exactly what ranges of spin rates on the fastballs were. So that's what I'm getting at here. I do think it was worth it because there were things that I saw where it was like, hey, this guy just is a really low spin rate guy, and we can try to get some more sink on the fastball and live lower in the zone and treat our treat our training that way with that in mind. Like a lot of us have been talking about with creating an identity. Your spin rate on your fastball is a difficult thing, like velocity, to improve, and we still don't really know all that much about improving spin rate. And so I think knowing what range you're in spin rate wise can really help you as a coach help guys figure out their identity and then figure out how to sequence hitters a little bit better.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, at the end of the day, I think our best tool as coaches have to be our eyes, and just being able to use those. And we're going to be able to sit here and be like, yeah, you're getting swings and misses. You're seeing how the hitters react. That's a huge one. As far as when it comes down to actually developing a certain pitch, and what you're trying to get out of it and how we're tunneling our pitches, we have to be able to see that with our eyes, and I think, just sitting here, all of us have, some experience in that and doing that. I think it's a huge tool that, coaches have to be able to utilize and just be like, how is the hitter seeing the ball right now? What is he doing? Is he swinging at this pitch in the dirt, or is he chasing this pitch, or is he not? And it's not even close. We have to kind of just be able to use that.
That's
I
great.
think to go a little bit into that, as far as the spin direction and spin rate, if you will, I think we could go a little bit further into like I said earlier, we have cell phones and they do a phenomenal job at slow motion capture. I don't personally know how accurate the spin direction is. Steve, do you know if the spin direction is rather accurate?
I don't know, and I don't even know if it's really all that important of something to know. I think just efficiency and rate would be king in those terms.
Right there, the efficiency portion. I think if we take a camera to it, even if it's our slow motion video camera, and we see, a guy, it comes back that he's spinning a fastball at 130. Guys, we all know that a 130 spin direction isn't fantastic by any means. It's going to be hit 500 feet over the fence in any direction. But just to use it as a basic example, if we see a guy that's spinning a ball on Diamond Kinetics that's at 130, but you're seeing, if he's a righty, you're seeing glove side cut on the ball, we can all assume that, the spin efficiency is probably rather low. We're just getting on the side of the ball. And maybe to take it a step further, to back it up and to get the buy-in from the guys that you're coaching, the guys on the staff, you take the camera out, put it in slow motion and say, hey, this is what the ball looks like coming off your fingers. That's why you're cutting it. And at a 130 spin axis, this isn't great. It's going to be hit a mile, and we need to make corrections. I don't know how useful Diamond Kinetics is. I haven't used it, but I want to take that a step further and say, maybe it's not just the Diamond Kinetics that we take the information from. Maybe it's also the cell phone and then the buy-in that's created to your players and your staff.
That's great. That's great. If we don't have any other questions, if you guys do have questions, or anybody that tunes in on YouTube as soon as this link goes up has a question, please email me, and I will be happy to provide you with contact information for Rob, for Steve, for Chris, for Scott, to follow up with them further if you have any questions going forward. I'd like to say thank you to you four guys on coming on tonight, and I learned a ton just being around you guys, and I always do. So that's why I was so excited to be here tonight. But thank you guys again. Thank you for those of you that's tuned in, and thank you for those of you that listen going forward. I'll have that YouTube link up this weekend, and I'll be shooting it out and posting it on social media as well too. So thank you again, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
Matt.
night, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.